In this tutorial, we will look at factoring a perfect square trinomial. To factor a perfect square trinomial, we're going to look at some things to see if it is even a perfect square trinomial. So let's put the first term up in this box in the upper left, and our last term, our constant, is going to go in the bottom. And then to see if it's a perfect square, we're going to go ahead and square root x squared, and that just gives me x, and we're going to square root 16, and that gives me 4. And to see if it's a perfect square, if I take x times 4 and double it, do I get 8x? So x times 4 is 4x. If I double that and get 8x, I actually match my b term. So this is b. And then because they multiply to get a positive, that means I have to have either a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative to get positive 16. And this b term actually tells me that they're both negative. So my 4 is really a negative. So I have negative 4x and negative 4x. Those add up to a negative 8x. And I can go ahead and factor out an x from both, a negative 4 from both, an x from both, and a negative 4 from both. Notice they're exactly the same. So I have x minus 4 times x minus 4. And if I write that shorthand, I make it a square. So that is my square for A. Letter B, I have 9x squared, and I have positive 4. And then if I square root 9x squared, I have 3x. And if I square root 4, I get 2. Then if we multiply those together, so 2 times 3x, I get 6x. And if I double that, do I get 12x? And I do. So I know that it's a perfect square. Now I'm going to look at, this is a positive 4, so it's either a positive times a positive or negative times a negative, but my b term tells me that it is positive and positive. So this is positive 6x. So we have plus 6x, plus 6x, and then my factors become 3x plus 2 and 3x plus 2, because here we have 3x and here we have 2. So those become 3x plus 2 times 3x plus 2, and that becomes 3x plus 2 squared if I'm going to write it in shorthand. Let's look at C and D. So in C I have 25x squared and 400. And if I square root 25x squared, I get 5x. And if I square root 400, I get 20. And if I multiply those together, 5 times 20 is 100x. And if I double that times 2, I get 200. And then I'm going to look at positive. Is a positive times a positive or a negative times a negative? And my b value says that it is a negative. So this is actually a negative 100x. So I have negative 100x, negative 100x. And I'll go ahead and factor. On the top I have 5x, and then I have minus 20, and then I have 5x and minus 20. Because here I have 5x, here I have 20, and we decided that they were both negative. So that's why I get 5x minus 20. So 5x minus 20, 5x minus 20. And to write that as a perfect square, I put squared. Letter D, I have 36x squared plus 64. And if I square root 36x squared, I get 6x. And if I square root 64, I get 8. If I multiply those together, I get 48x. And if I double that, I do get 96. So I know it's a perfect square. So then I look at, this is a positive, so positive times a positive or a negative times a negative, and my b value tells me positive times a positive. So I know that this is a positive 48x and a positive 48x, and I can go ahead and factor out 6x because this says 6x from both, and 8 from both, and we decided that both of the 8's have to be positive. So 6x plus 8 times 6x plus 8 is 6x plus 8 squared. So we notice when we have perfect squares that the diagonals are always exactly the same. So if we can square root my a term and my b and my c term and multiply them together and double them and make the middle, then basically if you notice, these and these are my factors. Then I just have to decide, is it a positive and a positive or a negative and a negative, and notice those signs show up in my final factored form.